The energy transition has been underway for more than 25 years. Solar, wind, run-of-river, and geothermal are all energy sources that hold promise in our ongoing determination to move away from fossil fuels. Interestingly, utility companies are not building them. Rather, they are turning to the private sector as suppliers. That means private enterprises are taking the risks. They're buying or leasing the land, building the power sources, maintaining them, and carrying the debt for decades. The costs are significant, and the investment is not for the faint of heart. A solar power plant regularly includes 45,000 or more panels. A wind turbine costs between $1.5 and $2.5 million to put in place. Then add in the cost of running transmission lines to the grid. Run-of-river projects can easily run into the millions of dollars. These are investment decisions that are regularly shaded with the desire to invest in a healthier planet. And then there's geothermal, which many people believe is the holy grail of renewable energy. And that holds true until you examine the cost of development versus the long-term payback. For independent companies, the price of geothermal and the payback equation does not add up. The women and men who venture into the renewable energy sector are brave, and they are devoted to ensuring that we have power sources that will reduce our impact on Mother Earth. We invited Jamie Houssian of Elemental Energy to join us for a conversation that matters about the business of renewable energy.
Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Welcome to Conversations.
Thanks for having me.
You have ventured into an area in the marketplace that I sometimes wonder, okay, we hear about renewable energy, and everybody goes, well, of course, solar, wind, run-of-river, and so on. But I can't help but think, who's going to create that? And you're one of those creators. What drew you to this sector? And then let's talk about what it takes to actually make that happen.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people seem to say when they hear you're in renewable energy, they say, that's the thing in the future, or that's the future. And I have to remind people that renewable energy is now the present, and it's happening now. And so I wanted to be a part of it. It seemed like an interesting time in history where a generation ago, we weren't really, as a society, fully in tune with, I think, the scope of the environmental problems and the environmental challenges that we're facing. Mm-hmm. And I think a generation from now in the future, it's going to be, we're either going to have sort of made it or broken it in a sense. And so it seemed a unique time in the world to get involved in an industry that was really trying to address the environmental crisis that we're facing. So. A lot of it just stemmed from a desire to be a part of something that was really in the now and have a positive impact at a time where it seems like we're really poised to do that.
Okay, this is new territory, new technology that's changing all the time. What are some of the risks associated with you as a private entity setting up this kind of venture?
Yeah, you can take different kinds of risks. What we do is essentially we develop renewable energy projects, develop and invest in renewable energy projects. And so we're not taking as much technological risk. There are folks out there that are trying to create the next mousetrap, whether it's a new type of wind turbine or a new solar panel or fusion. There's all kinds of folks working on the next thing. We're not sort of taking the technology risk so much, because when we build a solar farm or a wind farm or a run-of-river hydro plant, we're using commercially mature technologies. So there's different types of risks that you can take, but we're taking technologies now that are commercially proven, they're financeable, and we're really just sort of working on the advancement through the rollout of that existing technology.
So what kind of power generation are you involved in? Are you staying in one sector, or are you sort of spreading out across a variety of different types of power generation models?
Yeah, so my company, Elemental Energy, is involved primarily in three forms of renewables: wind, solar, and run-of-river hydro. Wind is in a lot of places right now, so you can go to a lot of different places and do wind. Solar is advancing very rapidly now, but of course there's certain areas where solar works better than others. Run-of-river hydro, we've been mostly active here in British Columbia. but there are some other opportunities that we're looking at outside of BC as well.
So are you working primarily in Canada?
Mostly in Canada right now, but we're also active in the U.S. as well. Yeah, I mean, it's just such a big market down there, as you know, and particularly with the rollout of solar over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been pretty active in the solar business in the U.S. as well.
When you get into the renewable energy business, in some ways, especially if you start to do it on larger scales, you're like a mini utility because you are producing power. But unlike, let's say, hydro or coal-fired or natural gas cogeneration, where they can operate 24/7, 365, you don't have that same opportunity. How do you then manage the needs of your customers to supply them with power if you have intermittent access?
Yeah, so most renewables are still intermittent. And the utility ultimately is responsible for dealing with the intermittent nature of renewable energy. And utilities are doing a great job at that. I think the best way to think about it is that we're essentially sort of like a wholesaler of electricity. So we're a generator, we generate electricity, we essentially sell it to the utility. The utility deals with the whole portfolio mix that they may have. Different states and provinces will have different mixes of wind and solar and hydro and fossil fuels that they can sort of mix together in a portfolio to meet the demands of their retail customers. So we don't deal with the retail customer, sort of the end retail customer. As a utility scale project developer or generator, we're essentially selling wholesale electricity to the utility, and then the utility is doing what they do to mix it and deliver it to the customer.
Got to get you to hang on for a second while we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Sorry for the interruption, but I need your help. I'm asking you to support the show by becoming a patron. That means pledging $1 per show. Conversations is a unique program. There's no grandstanding, no arguing, no yelling. Instead, I sit down with people who have unique insights, specialized knowledge, and experiences that inform and enlighten. And we do this on an incredibly limited budget with a very small crew. Well, this is my office and it's where I edit the show. And then once it's ready, we give it away. You know, so many different websites around the world are carrying this show, but they get it for free. They don't pay us. So I'm asking you to pledge $1 per show by going to patreon.com/conversations that matter. Thanks. We want to keep producing conversations, and with your help, we can. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, as you start telling me that, it's a complicated relationship because it's on again, off again, on again, off again. There must be a number of different elements in the way or that are part of the process that allow you to just start contributing and then not.
Yeah, I mean, each contract is different. We have what are called power purchase agreements that are essentially dictate the commercial relationship between the electricity generator and the utility. So each contract's a little bit different. Most contracts are take or pay. So if I can generate a megawatt hour of electricity, I have the right to sell it to the utility, and usually the utility has the obligation to take it and pay me for it. And typically, because renewable energies are non-carbon emitting sources of energy, they'll take the renewables and scale down their fossil fuels, or in the case of British Columbia, for example, we can store our hydropower behind a dam. So the utilities, there were certainly challenges in the early days of renewables, and there comes a point where the challenges increase as renewables take up a larger percentage of a utility's portfolio. But most of the utilities, there's states that are 30% wind now. There are countries like Denmark that are at times over 50% wind. And
Denmark, you go everywhere, and there's windmills all over the place.
Yeah, it's amazing what they've done. And the utilities are there are technical challenges, but the utilities have proven, in particular over the last few years, that they can find ways to integrate renewables.
So you've just brought a solar farm online now in southern Alberta. Why southern Alberta?
Well, so the Brooks Solar Project we developed and built in southern Alberta, just outside of Brooks, Alberta. It's important to us to develop renewables in places where you're offsetting carbon emitting sources, where the incumbent energy generation sources are carbon emitting. And Alberta, like a couple other provinces in Canada, still burns coal, and a fair amount of coal and natural gas to create electricity.
Right, even though they are transitioning to a natural gas or a cogeneration.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But those sources are going to play a role in the energy transition, but they're still carbon emitting sources of energy. So it's important to us to have a positive environmental impact. And so we're very excited to have the first utility scale solar project in Western Canada, in southern Alberta. It came online early this year, in early 2018.
So what does it take to build a project like that?
Takes a lot of permits.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's a lot of prep work, a lot of engineering, working with the municipality. We definitely, we try to go the extra mile with working with the local communities. We hired a ton of local labor for that project, worked with the county and the province, a number of different agencies, a number of different permits at the municipal level, the provincial level, federal level.
Wow.
So these things are years, usually several years in the making, sometimes 5 years plus.
So what do you do to pick that site? Do you have to sit there and do a review of annual sunlight, average sunlight in that period? Because I'm sure that plays a big role in where you pick that spot.
Yeah, we call that resource assessment. So we're assessing what the natural resource is. The natural resource in this case being how sunny is it. And there's pretty good data sets out there now for solar in particular. There's a variety of sources you can go to get information that will determine how much energy you can get based on building a certain size plant in different parts of the world. Southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan is the best solar resource in Canada.
Because of hours of sunlight?
Yep, that's right. That's right. I think there's 330 days of sun, close to that number, in Brooks, Alberta.
As opposed to 330 days of rain in Vancouver.
Here in Vancouver, yeah. We won't be building a plant like that in Vancouver in the immediate near term. But no, it's a great resource there, and there's good resources out there. I mean, it gets a little technical how you do it, but there's good resources to assess that. And then, of course, there's other factors. You got to have a site that's suitable to build on, ideally flat.
Well, you have to have access to the land too. So did you have to buy that land, or is it a lease that you've worked out with somebody who is in the area?
Yeah, we ended up buying the land. I'd say most of the time you're more often you're seeing a lease, but we had the opportunity to acquire the land, and this is a long-term project. Typically, these projects are designed to last at least 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
So how many panels would you have there?
About 49,000 solar panels.
49,000.
Yeah.
That's more than I thought.
Yeah, it's a decent-sized project.
Yeah. Where do you source the panels from?
Those panels were manufactured in Malaysia. Came across and landed in Vancouver, and then from Vancouver to Alberta.
So what has happened with solar panel technology that you now say, okay, this is worth the investment? Like, what are the elements that make this work?
Yeah, I mean, the main piece that has really happened with solar in the last sort of 5 to 10 years has been the cost reduction. Depending on depending on who you ask, cost reductions in the last. I've been in this industry for about 8 years now. In that time, the price reduction for solar panels or modules has been about an 80% cost reduction.
80%?
Yeah, it's been.
That's
amazing.
a dramatic drop.
Yeah. I remember, looking at solar projects when they were sort of $5 a watt, and now we're getting close to $1 a watt.
So that really improves the economics of this.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, what you're looking for is what we call the levelized cost of energy. So what is the price that we can create a kilowatt hour or a megawatt hour of solar energy for and sell it to a utility who's going to turn around and sell it to an end customer. And on account of the capital cost reductions that we've seen in solar, it's just allowed us to really deliver renewable energy like solar at prices that are cost competitive, to the point now where in certain parts of North America and the world, solar energy is the cheapest form of electricity that you can acquire.
I've got a whole bunch of other questions about this. I hope you don't mind me digging in. I'm not trying to say, okay, give away all your trade secrets so that somebody else knows how to do it. But you start thinking, okay, you're out there in the prairie. There's lots of wind. There's a bunch of dust. A bunch of that dust is going to settle on those 49,000 solar panels.
Yeah.
I'm sure you got to keep them clean. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, you always budget for operations and maintenance and that type of thing. So it's a little bit to be determined. We're in the first year of this plant in southern Alberta, and as I say, it's the first of its kind in that area. But there are some different creative solutions to cleaning solar panels. I mean, it costs money to go, and as you would imagine, it's a significant cost to go out and do that.
Yeah.
So it's
and I'm sure you'd want to be careful too, because I'm sure that this is not a surface that you want to be scratching.
Yeah. So there's a cost-benefit analysis to doing that work versus letting nature take care of it. When it rains, you get a bit of a natural cleaning, but we'll see how it goes. As I say, it's a 30-year plant. The panels are producing very well. It's sort of going according to plan so far. We'll do a cleaning of some sort, probably on average once a year.
So in the solar farm, you have a panel that generates electricity. What medium do you use to transmit that from the panel to wherever you're going to be boosting it out into the system?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a business guy, not a technical guy, so I don't want you to get too technical on me here.
Right.
But we create electrons through photovoltaic solar panels.
Yep.
And we move those. There's a collector system, which is essentially a bunch of wires buried underground.
Copper?
I believe they're copper. Yeah. and those wires move the electricity onto the distribution system.
Yep.
And that distribution system goes to a substation and then onto the transmission grid.
Wow.
Moves energy around.
And
the
once
province.
it's going, it's like pretty much self-sustaining, isn't it?
Yeah. They're relatively low maintenance for a solar farm. You know, less moving parts than, for example, a wind farm. Wind turbines require more maintenance.
So you're also into wind. So I've got a couple of questions about wind.
Yeah.
What's the transfer of energy from wind to electricity versus sunlight to electricity? How do the two compare, or are they completely apples and oranges?
You know, I mean, again, the technical elements that are involved from turning, having a solar panel versus a wind turbine generate electricity is a little bit above my pay grade. But at the end of the day, you are generating what essentially is a commodity, which is a kilowatt hour of energy. So there are certainly different forces at play to do that. Wind turbines sort of, typically turn a generator, which creates electricity, but at the end of the day, you're creating a commodity, which is a kilowatt hour.
So how many wind farms do you have?
We have interest in 5 wind farms, and Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Hawaii.
Where there's good amounts of wind.
Yeah, the Maritimes, the wind just screams out there, so those have been great projects for us.
Are you looking at geothermal?
We're not. There's certainly some challenges with geothermal that we don't quite have the stomach for.
What are some of those challenges?
You know, I've talked to some people in the geothermal industry, and one of the things that they've said to me that has given me pause is, it's got sort of all of the oil and gas type exploration and development risk with the utility type returns. And so once you get these things up and running, they can be quite productive and good solid sources of energy. But they're a lot harder to really go and find the resource and assess the resource.
Right.
So there's a lot of upfront risk for what, at the end of the day, may be a payoff, but considerable risk up front.
So if we're looking at people like you, private sector, to go out and create opportunities, yet we keep hearing people say, oh, geothermal, that's the answer to our problem. But you're saying, I'm not so sure. So do we look at renewable as always being supplemental power, or can it become main sources of power?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to bucket all to put all the different forms of renewable energy into one bucket. And I think different jurisdictions will have will be able to benefit from different sources. Places like the desert Southwest, of course, are gonna adopt solar at significant rates. Places like the Maritimes, as we mentioned, are gonna have a lot of wind. Different areas, geothermal does make sense. California and Nevada have had some success with geothermal. So it really does depend on the location.
Right. If we want to move to a greener economy where we're moving away, particularly from the burning of coal more than anything, there is this desire to be in a clean, green environment. And at the moment, the best that renewable sector can do is to provide supplemental energy.
Yeah.
Can you envision a day where we say, no, it is now going to become the dominant power source in multiple jurisdictions, all with a different mix of power sources?
Absolutely, absolutely. And 2016 was the first year where there were more renewable generation facilities put onto the grid than there were fossil fuel generation facilities. So it's not going to happen overnight. The incumbent technologies, be it natural gas or coal, are still, there's still life left on those assets. And of course, the incumbent owner-operators, some of them are being forced to move. In Canada, we're looking to really phase out coal at least by 2030. That's not that far off, right? And so we're needing to plan now for what's going to happen in a post-2030 environment.
So even though you're not building mega projects a la Site C and so on, we're not talking about insignificant dollars here. Each one of these projects costs millions and millions of dollars. And so there has to be a willingness on the investment community to get involved. And are you finding that the investment community is saying, yes, we believe that this is a good bet?
Yeah, for good projects, capital is not really the constraint, to be honest, both on the debt and equity side. So we're an equity investor. There's certainly a lot of competition out there and other folks that have realized that this is a good asset class to be invested in. So we're finding it pretty competitive. There's definitely more capital out there in our experience than there are good projects to invest in.
So what is the biggest challenge that we need to overcome right at the moment to be able to maybe accelerate the rate in which we move towards a greener source of power generation?
Yeah, I think we're doing a good job right now. As you say, we do need to accelerate. I think it's a combination of technology and policy, right? There needs to be policy at federal levels, at state and provincial levels as well. A lot of the energy space and electricity space in particular is governed at the provincial and the state level in North America. And of course, some states and provinces are more inclined to move quicker than others, but there does need to be policy incentives moving forward, whether it's cap and trade, carbon taxes, renewable portfolio standards is a big one. So there does need to be some policy push. We are headed in the right direction, but certainly, personally, I'd like to see it move faster. Energy storage is a big piece of it. Utilities getting more up to speed with how the integration of renewables can continue to accelerate and overcoming the technical challenges of that. Again, it's happening, but it does need to continue to move faster.
Well, I applaud you for moving into this sector, because when you're moving into new areas, there are risks that are associated with that. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in and doing this.
Thanks for having me, Stu. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.